Hello friends. To start off with, I would just like to invite you to feel your hands and feel your fingers and your palms against each other. And take a deep breath into the body, relaxing what can be relaxed. Feeling your feet. And from that baseline, just opening up to spacious awareness that contains all the movements and sensations in our body-minds. I do this as an invitation to remember that this path that I'm presenting and inviting you into is not one of deprivation or of effort, at least not significantly. It's about clarity. And as Thomas so beautifully put it, about sobriety or lucidity, being clear. And on that note, congratulations so much, Thomas and Jinun, for your beautiful video contributions. I was deeply inspired. And I've taken some time to put my thoughts in order to try to give the best response I can to the topic of balance and sobriety, as well as the question of how we can be more connected to ourselves and to the world. Big topics. So some of the most fundamental truths here are going to be fairly universal and familiar. So I'll try to move through those quickly into what might be valuable insights and some concrete practices and practice advice for you. Trying to be of as much service and value as possible here. So first of all, I'd just like to introduce this concept I love, the saying, balance in all things, even balance. To be balanced, to find one's center, as the Taoists might say, to embrace non-reactivity, as the Buddhists might say, can be considered one of the highest states to be in, and a fundamental entry point into connectedness with self and world. But we're not always there. And so I just want to invite a bit of softness and ease and acceptance for those parts that may not be in balance, and to allow those swings of desire to fulfill themselves, but with as much consciousness as possible. And this is why I also invited this little stepping back meditation. And so let's try to gain some consciousness about this topic. So we come at this from a space not of effortful striving, but of conscious easing. And sacrificing turbulence for chaos, turbulence and chaos for lucidity, as we move towards wholeness rather than perfection. With perfection still having some kind of value here, asterisk, to be explored later. So I'd like to start with the body. The body doesn't lie. It's only a question of listening to it. So if we don't feel connected, usually that's going to be because we're not fully present in the body. Now, there can be intensity, chaos, and turbulence in the body, of course, as a result of trauma, usually, or overstimulation, which ironically can lead to a counter-response of overstimulation, seeking pleasures, or the alternative of numbing. One is seeking to escape deeper into the pleasure nature of the body at the expense of awareness. The other being trying to step into awareness or mind at the expense of the body. And so we're seeking a middle path, not just of compromise, but of union and integration of opposites. More on that in a second. So how do we deal with this situation that we all find ourselves in to varying extents? Well, I think it's important to try to regain sensitivity within the body without overwhelm. So let's look at sobriety and as balance as slowness, groundedness within the body to allow the nervous system to calibrate itself so we can be clear, so we can be awake with what is without being overly stimulated by it. So really, I think the Buddhists and the Taoists and many other traditions really got this right, where we're looking for a middle path between stimulation and stillness, between mind awareness and body energy. Either extreme is going to disconnect us and lead to imbalance. So a general practice tip, something that I like to do on a regular basis, and also why I started with the hand touching, is to find out how much I can feel my body with minimal stimulation. When I can really feel energy flowing and opening the body from gentleness, then the body's desire for positive sensation and intensity is matched with slowness that invites attention. And this is a principle that can be brought into pretty much any spiritual practice. So in terms of the body, this, I think, is one of the key principles that I would emphasize in terms of how to move more deeply into the body. A lot more to be said, of course, but with such a big topic, let's just keep it snappy. Okay? So on the second topic, the second pillar of mind, we're really looking at two different minds, two different selves. And this is where we're getting into perfection territory. There is the lower self, which is the ego mind, which is within samsara, within the realm of duality, where everything's always oscillating from one polarity to the next. And we can make some adjustments from this perspective, but ultimately we will always be limited by operating within a system that is itself not stable. That is why the Buddhists emphasize taking refuge into the one thing that is still, that is permanent, that is outside, so to speak, this wobbliness and instability, which is not an escape. This is very important. Many people confuse this. So I'd like to bring in a little bit of theory here. My primary path is called Mahamudra. It contains 3 maps, and the first map is essentially from regular ordinary awareness to awake awareness, meaning that the focus is on luminous, clear, empty, spacious mind itself. When people come into contact with awakening or get an image of enlightenment, this is usually the emphasis. It's the spacious component. So I often call this dualistic non-duality. Yes, there's a state of non-duality, but our relation to it is very dualistic. Non-duality good, duality bad. Instead, in order to be truly balanced between the higher and the lower, and trying to get away from this value judgment, which creates an imbalanced view and an imbalanced path and an imbalanced effort in our spiritual practice. The solution can be found philosophically within the second path, called the path of radiance, where from the perspective of awake awareness, the view of the ground of awareness, Shiva, infinite consciousness, the awareness is brought back to the senses, back to thought, back to ego formation. But from this perspective, the ego is an activity. It's a flow of energy that doesn't coagulate into a kind of membrane, a film that separates self and world. And when we can rest in this awareness and embrace duality from that perspective, it's not really duality. Or at least we're not caught in it. And that allows these waves to still themselves. In Mahamudra, we use the term self-arising, self-liberating. Everything that arises by itself and eases by itself. If I add effort to make it be still, I'm creating opposite waves, which is just going to create more waves. Now, this can be somewhat of a high bar. We are talking about nirvana here, about the ultimate goal. At the same time, I think it's important to talk about that because that is the ultimate solution to the paradox of self and world, to the paradox of trying to meet opposing views. It is the point where, to quote Christ in the Gospel of Thomas, in me all paradoxes are united. And so there's a lot more to be said on this subject. But without going into the more advanced practices, which is my specialty and what I care the most about, but which is a bigger topic than this video, we can move towards it from stillness. In stillness, even without transcending, dissolving, releasing the ego, we can move far towards that and find a great deal of balance simply by stilling the mind. And this is where I find the most useful practice is the view from Mahamudra called Ocean and Waves, where we become aware of consciousness as an infinite ocean. And you're welcome to do this with me now. And perceive any discernible, identifiable phenomena, sensory experience, energy in the body, thoughts, simply as waves within that ocean. Simply having an appreciation of this dynamic goes a long way to allowing these waves to begin stilling themselves, which gives us a sense of peace and an appreciation of the benefits of that peace, which can then motivate us to take the great step into awake awareness, which we can also call union with God. So a nice little tagline to finish with might be that awareness isn't something you do. It's what's left when you stop doing. And it's what holds the effort of the doing. Moving on to the third pillar of the heart. For me, the heart is at its core the union of opposites. If you look at the symbol of the heart chakra, it's an upwards triangle and a downwards triangle in a circle. Upwards moving energy of Shakti, or vital life force. Downwards moving energy of Shiva, or awareness, meeting in union. This also is the union of inner and outer, of up and down. All polarities are merged within this field. And from this field, of course, we can meet each other. So the invitation here is to feel fully without identifying. And again, balance in all things, even balance. Sometimes it is useful in a more therapeutic, active context to allow this identification, to allow these divorced, orphaned parts within us with their unmet needs, like an inner child longing for connection, and fully just be that fragile, vulnerable baby in a setting that can hold it. But more generally, we're seeking to find that greater mind of wholeness that can allow these sub-minds to arise, to be seen and witnessed, and to be eased, and to be allowed to softly, subtly integrate. What we really want here is to allow the heart to break. To quote The Rose by Bette Midler, it's the heart afraid of breaking that never learns to dance. So, sacred pain, I think, is very, very key. A nice practice here to move on from the ocean and waves. If you hold the view of ocean and waves, often there will still be this turbulence between the stillness and the movement. So it'll be this oscillation. You go back and forth. And a way of engaging more deeply and finding a deeper resonance is simply to localize the awareness in the heart as you do this. So if you open up to spaciousness, you take the view that everything arises within spaciousness. It's just a wave in the ocean. And then you bring your awareness into the heart, into the feeling tone. And feel the pain of the tension within the heart. Instead of allowing ourselves to be moved by the waves of feeling and seeking the stillness as an ideal, we can fully embrace that tension and allow it to bloom, allow it to open. See if there's a warmth there. Invite and open. Maybe tension arises somewhere else, maybe in the throat. Allow the mind to be guided to the point of intensity, whatever it is. And be with it as fully as possible, and to invite discomfort, knowing that it is energy releasing itself. And that it is the lack of this relief that has caused the accumulation of tension and the numbing down of it. We can even bring in a sense of devotion here. I often use the phrase, give to God. Give everything to God. Whenever something intense arises that we grasp to, whether it's pleasure and joy or it's pain and suffering, knowing that it's held ultimately within this greater field of awareness, and cultivating, if we don't have it already, there's something that can be cultivated, a feeling of love and closeness and belonging in it, can really help to move these feelings through. Again, this is tying into the theme of balance as well as sobriety, of not seeking to escape the pain. As children, we naturally do that, but we can correct ourselves. And this is also where I want to emphasize how we move from coarse or gross corrections into more and more subtle forms of correction. Initially, we have to move from one extreme to the other to really know what the extremes are. Hence the balance in all things even balance, to allow that cycle to happen. But over time, we start moving closer to a center that can hold the duality and perceive it for what it really is, a polarity of a single, radiant, rich field of experience. And in doing so, this is the last concept I'll introduce, we find our inner tuning fork, as I like to think of it, our inner compass. This is something that I've only really been starting to feel very strongly in the last year or two. I've been practicing spiritual practice, meditation, yoga, for 13 years. It's been the cornerstone of my life in all this period. But for most of it, it was very exclusively focused on the ultimate. The ultimate is great. The ultimate meaning nirvana, God. Because it holds all the lower levels of mind and allows them to align themselves from the most superior perspective with the highest vantage point. But we are not seeking to embrace this higher vantage point over these lower ones. Lower is not inferior. Roots are not inferior to the crown of a tree. But really, by resonating with our heart and with our guts, and for most of us, this means a reconnection down to the body. For some of us who are very intense body practitioners, it does mean to go further into the mind. We refine our inner compass of what is right for us in the moment. Consider the cultivation of appetite, for instance. A child will be overcome with intensity and desire for sugar and candy and munch everything. If we don't grow out of this, we become addicts. We take that same hunger into drugs and unhealthy food and unhealthy lifestyles. The more evolved, a triggering concept for some of you, but it's fundamental to the development of mind, person would genuinely hunger for a nice salad, a light meal. I notice very clearly my state of consciousness based on my appetite. And this is not a deprivation. I think this speaks to Thomas's feeling of being misunderstood. That, because I've recognized that in myself. By connecting more deeply to our inner compass, we cultivate, the whole system starts to know more deeply what is better for it. And that comes with a balancing. We were less oscillating between extremes, where we can start bringing spirituality into the everyday by sensing into this inner compass. And in order for this to be held and allowed to complete itself, these processes of tension release, of alignment, we need community. We need to bring this practice into our bodies, into our lives, and into our relationships. So I hope that we can do that together through Yoga Church. And I hope that this little response has been useful to you, given you something to think about. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to post them in the comment section. And I wish you a beautiful day.